Hello everyone, this is Andrew here with Spark Finance, bringing you the most important business news that recently occurred. To start off with, we do have to mention GameStop and AMC, these kind of Reddit short squeeze stocks. They got obliterated last week. GameStop was down over 80%, AMC was down over 48%. So I hope you got in on that kind of short squeeze when it happened the week before and then got out before this week where everybody took a lot of losses on it. So I have a whole separate video on that one if you want to know more, but we're just giving a highlight of what happened there. But the short squeeze, the infinity or gamma squeeze already happened, and now we're seeing where it's going to go in the future, probably back down to earth. Then for our other business news, we have Otis Worldwide Corporation. This is a company that's been around forever. I remember doing research on the Eiffel Tower, and they actually were the ones that did the elevators in the Eiffel Tower, if you can imagine that, in the 1900s. So they're still doing elevators and escalators and stuff like that in malls and skyscrapers. They did pretty good on earnings here. They had earnings of 66 cents per share, which was 7 cents higher than the analyst expectations. They also beat on revenue. So they're still around, they're still doing strong, and they even raised their guidance for the 2021 year. So they're expecting to do well in 2021, regardless of the pandemic that's occurring, right? Then we have news about Tesla. So Tesla, we talked about in previous videos, the government basically told them, hey, there are these vehicles with faulty touchscreens, and you better recall this 135,000 vehicles, or we might have to do some kind of, lawsuits or investigations against you. So Tesla now just bowed down to that and said that they're going to be recalling 135,000 vehicles. So this was interesting news that they are actually taking an active step to do this before it gets to the courts, basically. Now, despite this, a bunch of analysts just raised their price targets on Tesla. We talked in last week's video about Tesla's earnings and how they did, and the stock sold off a bit after that. And then now you had these analysts coming out with, they put one estimate was for $1,010 a share, another was for $1,036 a share, and the last one, they raised their estimate, which was originally at $515 to $1,200 a share. Keep in mind, the stock right now is around $850 a share. So what's the point of coming out with these estimates if it can literally double what you had predicted the share price would be? I don't know. It's just analysts just making up numbers once again. Well, Tesla was down a few days after the earnings, but then this kind of gave it new light with all of these analyst estimates coming out and raising their price targets. And if you're looking at the stock overall, it's up 900% since the beginning of last year. We have some other interesting news in the EV markets. We're seeing all these different companies getting into the EV markets. It's becoming the new big trend here. Tesla's market share in Europe went down to 13% or 98,000 vehicles last year in 2020. Volkswagen has 24% of that market, and Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi Alliance, if you can say all that in one sentence, has 19% of the European market share. In 2019 now, Tesla had 31% of the EV market in Europe, and they had 109,000 vehicles. So not only did they sell or have their total deliveries go down, but they also lost market share to these other competitors. So it would be okay if maybe, their overall market share went down, but they still had more deliveries. It's, after all, a growing market, right, for EVs, but it was down on both sides of the spectrum there. So that's pretty interesting to see that. And we're seeing these big car companies really coming out now into the EV space, the new trend. Then, speaking of the electronic vehicle companies, we have NIO, which they want to be the Chinese Tesla pretty much. They had deliveries of 7,225 vehicles in January. Now that's an increase of 352% over the last year period. But keep in mind, when you're delivering a few thousand vehicles, it's not on the scale of these million-dollar vehicles a month from these other big production companies. The battle of Bitcoin continues. We had some news because Elon Musk, who is the richest guy in the world, puts a message on his Twitter bio and says Bitcoin on there. And instantly, he's got more followers than the President of the United States. So everybody goes and buys Bitcoin. So Bitcoin had been hovering around 33,800 or so. And it was doing that for a while. And now this news came out. And then at the end of the week here, once again, we're over $40,000 for one Bitcoin. So you're seeing how these influencers and these big personalities can really move up the prices of these items. We saw that in GameStop going on earlier. Elon Musk also tweeted about Dogecoin, and I feel like he's just trolling the entire internet right now with all of these memes. So the cryptocurrency Dogecoin, which is not, I'm not going to get into all the details about the good and the bad with that one in particular, but it's very, very speculative, and people are just going into it because everybody else is. It went up 500% and then crashed, and then people are thinking it's going to go up again. But I'm seeing all of this stuff, people just driving into these speculative bubbles. And I want to see, when is there going to be a shakeout that kind of clears out the marketplace and puts people back into sound investments? Then Ford announced that they're going to be utilizing Android Google Cloud by 2023 in all of their vehicles. So previously, Ford had their own infotainment system, right? They would go into their car and it'd be Ford's brand. Now they're actually using Android. So that's a big push towards the Google operating system. And keep in mind, we talked about GM earlier. GM actually had that deal with Microsoft where they're using Microsoft software. So a lot of these automotive companies, they see Tesla and NIO and a million other different kinds of companies that are coming out and trying to attack their business models, and they're trying to now reinvent themselves. This is why competition is good. They're trying to make better products, and that means the consumer is going to benefit from that. Overall, in the European Union, we had some GDP numbers come out, and the Eurozone was actually down 0.7% in the final quarter of last year. The overall Eurozone shrink in 2020, though, was negative 6.8%, which was actually less than expected, but that's pretty crazy to be shrinking in 1 year, 6.8% in terms of GDP. That was worse than the United States. I believe we did minus 4.3% or something around there, if I can remember correctly. So they had additional lockdown measures and containment of the virus and all, and that led to a worse contraction. Then you have Amazon. Big news from Amazon. Jeff Bezos, who had been running Amazon for like 30 years now, will be retiring as the chief executive officer. This is huge news. Amazon has been one of the most popular stocks in recent times. It took them, 30 years to build this company from shipping books online to make it into the powerhouse where anything you ever need is delivered to your door. Now, this reminds me of when Bill Gates kind of stepped down from his leadership role at Microsoft. And there was a period where, the sales, the revenue, the earnings didn't grow quite as fast as it had in the past, but they were still growing. And now you look at Microsoft, and Microsoft is doing really well. And the person that is taking over instead of Jeff Bezos is going to be somebody called Andy Jassy, and he was in charge of the cloud business. So we're seeing how important this cloud business is in all these different companies, where now this guy is going to lead Amazon himself. The transition is supposed to actually take place towards the second half of 2021. And now Jeff Bezos doesn't have to be in the public eye. He doesn't have to be going for congressional hearings for monopolies and everything like that. And he said specifically, he's going to be executive chairman now. And he will stay engaged in important Amazon initiatives, but also have the time and energy to focus on some of his other projects, like the Washington Post and Blue Origin and some of his charity organizations. And keep in mind, SpaceX right now has been beating Blue Origin in terms of the reusable rockets. So he can focus on those areas, still own all these shares of Amazon and do well because of that, and remain as executive chairman. And he said, quote, "I've never had more energy, and this isn't about retiring. I'm super passionate about the impact on these organizations that I can have." So right there, it's just like, it seems like he wants to put his energy in different areas. He already made Amazon as about a $1.6 trillion company on its way to $2 trillion. This quarter, when they reported, Amazon did just what Apple did, and they had over $100 billion in revenue. It was $125.5 billion they made for 2020. Net income, how much profit they made, was $7.2 billion. The company right now controls about 40% of the online shopping marketplace in the United States. And that's why they're getting investigated from, everybody else. So it's pretty crazy seeing that. And, is it going to go up from there? Is it going to go down? Right now, UPS, United Postal Service, said 13% of their revenue is coming from Amazon. So then you also have the idea of, why is he going out now, right? It's kind of like he's like Dave Chappelle, where he goes out at the top kind of thing. The company's at all-time highs, the market share is up, doing really well. He was just the world's richest man for a while. The company had estimates of $7.23 a share, and then I think the earnings came in at about $14.90 a share. So it was like double the amount. So, that's a good way to go out on a quarter like that. Then Alphabet, aka Google, aka give us all your data, they announced their earnings. Their revenue for the fourth quarter fourth quarter was a record $56.9 billion. Their net income was $15.23 billion compared to last year's comparable quarter of $10.67 billion. And the earnings per share was $22.30 compared to $15.35 a share a year earlier. So they are doing really well, like all these other tech companies. They beat estimates, it was $10.92 billion and $15.77 a share, and they beat both of those. So some big takeaways would be that advertising revenue was up 22% from a year earlier. And we saw originally in 2020, like at the start of the year when the markets fell apart and the pandemic started, ad revenue just crashed, and we're seeing it pick up again. And that's even without like travel and a lot of that stuff coming back, and hotels and airlines. They're still seeing the increase. And then YouTube, just a dominant force. YouTube has revenue that increased 46%, not for the year, just in this quarter. So that's amazing right there. YouTube now reaches more people between the ages of 25 and 49 than all of the cable networks combined. So you can see, who's the main competitor to YouTube? Is there anybody? So that's why it helped propel Google's stock price up 22% in just 3 months. Then we have SpaceX competing with Blue Origin, right? So they tried to launch their Starship S9 prototype, and it looked like it was going well. It launched into the air, but then as it was trying to make its landing, it went and blew up on the launch pad. Well, that's the second time it happened now. This is the same thing that happened with the S8. They already have the S10 that is lined up for a launch. But I was looking at this. They're cheaper rockets. The Falcon 9 is a cost of around $54 million. So how much did this one that just blew up on the tarmac or the launch pad, how much did that cost them, right? This big Starship is supposed to carry 400 passengers into space, even go to Mars. It costs $216 million to build that, and it costs $2 million to launch it from the launch pad. So they're supposed to launch their civilian rockets with passengers on it this year. I hope that one is not exploding like all these test flights are doing here. Hope their insurance companies are ready for all this. So we'll see how that plays out in the future. They're still doing a lot of testing on it. And remember, the Falcon 9 rockets originally blew up a lot of times. I think it was 4 times before they got it working. United Postal Service had a very good quarter. Their fourth quarter sales were up to a record $24.9 billion. All of those packages going to everybody's houses now. Chipotle Mexican Grill, you would think, would do well in the pandemic. They reported earnings of $3.48 per share, which was below estimates by 25 cents a share. So that's pretty significant difference there. And the revenue was kind of in line with forecasts, but there were additional costs around the pandemic that cut into their profit margin, and people weren't really expecting that. Then you have Spotify. So Spotify came out and they had a 27% increase in users from a year ago. So now the total is 345 million subscribers, monthly active users, I guess you would call it, for Spotify. And an interesting note that revenue per subscriber fell 8% to just €4.26. And that's pretty bad because you look at Spotify, how many different ads do they pop up on that thing? When you look at it, when you're playing songs, they want you to get the premium. It's kind of like YouTube with 10 ads per video, right? And yet they're still not doing so well per user. Advertising revenue came in at $281 million. There are now also 2.2 million podcasts on the platform. Remember, we were talking about this earlier. There were these big deals, hundreds of $1 million deals. They got like the likes of Joe Rogan and Gimlet Media to sign up with these exclusivity deals with their platform on Spotify. That helped cause the consumption of podcast content on the platform to double from the amounts in 2019. 25% of their monthly users listen to a podcast, which is up from 22% in the previous quarter. Revenue was up 17% to 2.17 billion euros. But the big problem here is that they're still not making they're not making the dinero, right? The company posted a loss of 125 million euros or 66.66 per share. That is about half the size of the loss they had last year. But once again, they're still losing money. How come this is such a huge company with so many users and they're still not? That's like more users than Netflix, I think, that they have. Now here's a scary number. Free cash flow which tells you how much cash is generated from their ongoing operations, was only 74 million euros. And the previous year, they had 169 million euros in free cash flow. And that's money that they can be using for all different types of events and everything that they want to do, if they want to get new podcasters or advertising or anything. Then you have inflation watch. So the Postal Service, the US Postal Service, decided that, we should raise postal rates 5.5 to 9% this year for different types of mailings, includes letters, catalogs, magazines, packages. They wanted to do a little price increase. So at the same time as this is going on, their delivery of mail on time, they take metrics on this, it was 90% last year of the mail that went out was arriving on time. Now it's only 75%. So they're doing worse of a job and then want a pay increase. And an organization that was against this is seeking to appeal to the court in the District of Columbia to prevent the price increases. And that group, it's all the people that are involved with a lot of big mailing programs, commercial mailers, and nonprofit groups. And they said that the postage cost will be like $2 billion if they do this price increase. So they're really trying to fight them on that, and fight the US Postal Service. So we'll see what happens. And then another thing with inflation, we have bleachwood, softwood, kraft pulp futures in Shanghai were up 48% in December to $1,037 a ton. So that is really significant there, because think of all the types of wood packaging, like the cardboard paper kind of stuff. If you use paper containers, material for, coffee cups and packaging boxes when you order takeout, think of how many people are ordering takeout, right? So during the worst of the pandemic, it got down to $600. And before the pandemic, it was, around $800 a ton. And it just went over 1,000 now. So that's a really significant increase. There's also a lot of use for people with restroom items. If you're using like toilet paper or paper towels, you're getting a triple ply toilet paper at home. You're not getting the one that you use in the office, which is that, you hold that paper up and you can see through it, right? So people are getting the higher quality ones, which requires more of this basic resource. And it's important for China because China actually buys 30% of the world's wood pulp and makes those raw materials into the products and packages that we use every day. So I thought that was something interesting you don't really hear on a lot of different news areas.